anything else. But yeah, so e-waste would be, from what I understand, any product that takes electricity or has an electronic component in it that is not considered recyclable, not necessarily recyclable, but not disposable in a landfill, and it's no longer in use. It's looking for disposal. That's what it would be. So, for example, you'll see like your charges and stuff. They'll have a trash can with an X through it. That would be, anything like that would be considered e-waste. A lot of times there's lead or mercury or something in there that they don't want in the landfill, so they're looking for you to specially recycle it. Does that help?
Yeah. Okay. One of the biggest downsides of electronic is that they're toxic to the environment. Do you think people really know how toxic they are?
Oh, definitely not. Look up some of the stuff that a lot of the components are getting a lot better. You don't find very many computers with like mercury in it anymore, for example. The big ones you're going to find still in stuff is lead. Lead's a big one. Silicone ground up can actually cause a lot of lung issues, so you don't really want that sitting there leaching in. But the big stuff they don't use anymore, at least not here in the United States. Most companies take usually pride in not using those kinds of materials. And I mean, you used to find mercury was probably one of the bigger ones. You would find those in like the old CRT monitors. There's a lot of lead still. A lot of silicone, a lot of silica, some other metals usually, but they're not usually nearly as toxic as those things were. Mercury poisoning is a terrible thing. Lead can, of course, cause cancers, and it can also cause you a lot of mental issues too if ingested. So you don't really want that leaching into the soil. But it's come a long ways these days.
If people knew that with the recycling electronics would lead to birth defects, liver, brain, kidney damage, etc., do you think many people would still do it?
Which part? The using the materials in electronics or the recycling piece?
Recycling.
Well, here's the thing. I'd love to say people are noble, and yes, they would look at the greater benefit and say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't be just digging a hole in the ground and dumping them in there and hoping it doesn't leach. But unfortunately, I've been at this too long. Because ultimately, what it comes down to, perfect example, are CRT monitors. They were $50 at one point in time. I'm not sure if it's higher now or lower, but they were $50 to recycle a CRT monitor, as opposed to the businessman I know who said $50, what the hell, opened up his trash can, bumped them in the bottom, and buried them under a pile of papers. So they would still end up in, he was hoping that they wouldn't notice that there was a bunch of monitors at the bottom of his trash bin. The reality is a lot of times money talks on this stuff, and a lot of people are getting called out on it now. A lot of companies, they're very proud of their recycling programs or how they're handling this stuff, but the reality is recycling is expensive, and a lot of the smaller manufacturers are looking at it and hoping they don't get caught. That's unfortunately a lot more common. And if you want to look at this sometime, look at all the stuff that's being dumped into third world countries. There's entire towns and cities in like Africa or Asia that are nothing but just computer components for them to sift through and recycle, but it's a mess. It's not pretty.
Do you know what happens if someone absorbs more than they can to handle chemicals in a cell phone?
So like the chemicals in your cell phone itself?
How do they recycle it?
So the recycling components, your cell phones don't have. The big one is the batteries, the lithium-ion batteries. Not something you really want leaching into the soil, but most recycling companies are going to have the proper handling of that. I mean, the reality is it's all sealed up. They take the battery out, they throw it in a container, and the container goes to a recycling facility that's designated and designed to handle the recycling of those materials. The other components in there, very unlikely to have issues with that. Most people are more worried about the radiation that's coming off of your phone. Anything that's broadcasting is going to do that. And there's a lot of studies still for or against what the damage is from that. But the recycling piece, most people here in the United States are not going to run into issues with that, especially if disposed of properly. Not disposed of properly, it's going to take a lot of cell phones to cause an issue. The reality is those batteries are pretty well packed, but they are pretty volatile too. You don't really want to be just throwing them in a trash can. Especially nowadays, there's so many recycling places around. I mean, Best Buy takes batteries, Target takes batteries, Walmart takes batteries. Everyone takes batteries these days. You know, there's little slots. Dump your cell phone and get it recycled. Or there's also programs too. In fact, we do one here with the high school where you can hand in old cell phones and they actually turn around, refurbish them, and hand them to like abuse shelters and that kind of stuff. So, because the phone's even deactivated, you can still call 911 off of them. That's legally mandated. So if the phone is on, even if it doesn't have a SIM card in it, even if it doesn't have a contract, you can still dial 911 and still get help from that. So that's what's happening to, I'd like to say, a good portion of them these days.
Do you think people should or shouldn't recycle electronics, and why or why not?
Well, I think it's a very good idea. I mean, I don't feel like dying from this stuff, and it probably won't affect me. It probably won't affect you, but it might affect, you know, your children, your grandchildren, or great-grandchildren down the road. The reality is, given enough time, the environment does tend to take care of this stuff. But when you look at it from a grand picture, you know, it might take a couple thousand years to render this stuff harmless in the environment. And, well, by that point, as far as we're concerned, the consequences have already come. So, you know, it's generally a good idea.
And what are your final thoughts about electronic waste?
Well, I mean, let's be honest here. People aren't, you know, going to stop buying cell phones. There's going to be a lot more of it. As long as it's handled responsibly, I think we'll be just fine. It's the problem is when it's not handled responsibly. And that's really anything. It's not just electronic waste. It's any materials that's not handled properly. Look at the Johns Manville session here. You know, when you dispose asbestos improperly, any material that's disposed of improperly can cause you issues. And a lot of this stuff, too, we're still learning what the full effects are. So at least if it's getting recycled, you know, it's going to a responsible facility where at least they're hopefully managing everything properly. But the reality is there'll still be some issues. We're still trying to understand the full effects of what some of this stuff does. And history's littered with that. I mean, lead was a common, you know, mercury used to be a common toy. People used to just play with it. Look at the Romans. They used to actually use it as a seasoning in their salads. So life is funny as far as that's concerned. I'm guaranteeing you probably 50, 100 years out, we're going to be sitting back and laughing about some of the materials we used in some of these components and how toxic they were. We just didn't understand it. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea, for certainly. You know, I don't think digging, you know, what happens right now is you stick it in a trash can, it goes into a waste management truck, they take it out here to the dump, they dig a hole, they shove it in the ground, and you hope it composts. This stuff won't compost. And, you know, given enough time, it could definitely cause you some issues. I mean, out by the waste, a lot of that's well system, septic. If it leaches into the ground, it could leach into the water. Now you've got an issue with the water supply. That's the last thing you want in the world, is bad water around here. You just don't know. And there's, if nothing else, it's the unknown. You want to be recycling this stuff and get it out of there, so if there is a problem, you don't have to worry about it. Hopefully that helps you out some.